So welcome everyone to Centralized Authentication with Apache APISIX and Ory Hydra. My name is Bobur and I am a developer advocate. You can find me on these following social channels. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm based in Tallinn, Estonia. I hope next time maybe I can make it like in person. But this time we are delivering this, of course, online. So let's get started. As you move to distributed service architecture, right, you may not consider using common libraries or SDKs to build your own service, like to handle cross-cutting content like security, authentication, or authorization. Because in our modern era, there are already some free solutions for us to handle this kind of stuff, right? You can fully focus on the business task. On core business task at your hand. So in this session, we would like to show you how to enable API authentication with two coolest open source projects like Apache APISIX and Ory Hydra. With that plan, let's get started. So here is my plan for today. We are going to start with understanding what's API authentication shortly. We can have a look at how API Gateway centralized authentication can solve some kind of cross-cutting problems, right, regarding the authentication, and you will learn how to use Ory Hydra as identity provider, and in the end, we'll have a demo by using OIDC, OpenID Connect plugin, together with Ory Hydra. There are, of course, many ways to authenticate API requests, right? Here are the three most common methods you can see, like HTTP basic authentication, API key authentication, one of the oldest one, and OAuth authentication, or there's a simply no authentication. Let's say when you have the cases for the internal services, when they are talking to each other, of course, you don't need, in this scenario, any authentication, right? And let's say API Gateway also is an essential component of API management solution. Right? It serves as a central point for routing all incoming requests to the intended destination, whether that can be upstream server, third-party API services, or database, or even the serverless. In other words, like API Gateway, in this case, it acts as a single layer between your clients and backend services, right? And how you can roll this between clients and backend services, you can manage them. And API Gateway is also further can be extended with the countless plugins, right, to handle authentication, traffic control, observability, and security. Next, let's see the features. Some of the features, if you don't know about API Gateway, you can always have a look at what are the features you can make a use of them. Some of the features you can see here, like a caching, retry policies, load balancing, and or some kind of transformation. But there are many API Gateway providers nowadays who is open source. Let's take Apache APISIX. It's a very lightweight and one of the project of Apache Software Foundation. You can think of like Apache Kafka or Cassandra, right? Tomcat. APISIX was one of the fastest growing project of the ESF. It's very easy to configure and very quick to deploy. It's capable of authenticating a particular user or machine that accessing your API. For example, you have three services you want to expose to the external world, as you can see on the right side of this diagram. And it shows more traditional authentication approach. Each application service might have its own authentication logic that's used to support the set of process handling, right? For these different kind of scenarios in the authentication. On the right side, you can see another diagram. The user and application party can directly go first to the APISIX and then identify itself and the client, created maybe by the credentials. Then APISIX can pass this authenticated data, identity information further down into upstream services. In this scenario, upstream services may be your microservices or any backend API. And the backend service on that side can easily read user information without doing any authentication because it believes the APISIX, and it can just read the user information from the header that Apache APISIX provided. very simple scenario, right? It's mostly commonly used in nowadays. And also, most of the time, developers is really looking for centralized authentication because of this previous scenario, because centralized authentication can solve many problems and at the same time has some benefits. One of the benefits is the security, because there is no need to keep multiple authentication credentials in different places anymore. Also, application can share the user credential data by improving complicated performance issues by responding quickly, not by going to upstream service, but responding quickly from the API gateway level to your requests, coming to the application service. And next, for example, it can also improve observability, because API gateway is central point. You can observe your services in one place. And also it's easier for development, right? Because it reduces the amount of time you are spending on the development of authentication, authorization logic inside the API service, as I mentioned earlier. And we don't have to put this logic for each service. There are a variety of providers such as Okta, AWS Cognito, Azure Active Directory, some of the famous ones, and also Ory Hydra. In this session, we are mainly focusing on and discussing on the Hydra, right? As OpenID Connect authorization server today. And Ory is the largest open source ecosystem. I don't have to introduce, I think this is the audience about it, but Ory Hydra also has many products, right? One of the products is, Ory has many products, Hydra is one of them. And if you would like to, for example, enable third-party solutions to access your APIs, Ory Hydra can act as an identity provider, like a Google, Facebook, Microsoft, or you can enable your browser, mobile, or other applications to access your backend services. At the same time, you don't have to store passwords on the device, or can maybe rework anytime your access tokens for the users. If you're looking for something very simple to manage OS2, like authentication protocol, and you can always go and choose Ory Hydra in this case. And I also recently heard that Ory Hydra also supporting this managing platform in the cloud, right, which is very good. And many Ory products can be integrated each other very easily. You can, Hydra, of course, can work standalone, but you can, of course, make use of other products together. So with that, I can quickly jump into my demo. Here we're going to use multi-container app. Maybe it's better I run my demo quickly. So here we go.
So all theoretical knowledge in mind, now we can jump into the demo session. Today, we're going to run the multi-container app by using Docker Compose, for example, partially taken from Ory Hydra 5 minutes tutorial, how to get started with Ory Hydra on the official website. And we're going to walk through how to set up Ory Hydra as a generic identity provider. And then we'll have a look how to configure Apache APISIX OIDC, OpenID Connect plugin for our exit.
I think we lost the voice, right?
Project, ESP.NET Web API. And then we will perform how to enable the client credential grant and authorization flows for the existing API by using Ory Hydra and Apache APISIX. You can find all code examples on my GitHub by going to /APISIX. On your browser, you can navigate to Hydra APISIX repository on GitHub and make a git clone. Then you can go to the project root folder and run Docker Compose with a quick start APISIX YAML file. And as you can see, the Docker containers now start to run. And now it's up and running. And if you go to Docker desktop, you can even see running containers, including some of the containers like Product API, and APISIX, PostgreSQL, and Hydra itself. If you open the Hydra APISIX project, you can find some important folders. You can pay attention, like I provided all the command line examples you can find on the CMD folder. If you open APISIX, you can find all the kernel or the commands we are using today in this demo. For example, we first run the multi-container app with product APIs backend, APISIX, etcd and Ory Hydra with the Docker Compose, and next we can create our new client, host client by using the Hydra commands, like a Hydra client create command. You can just copy and paste this simple into the terminal. If you run that, you to create a new client with client ID, your client ID, and they can provide some kind of secret, and we are using the endpoint, the admin endpoint of Hydra. And we're giving some grant types like client credentials, authorization code, and to be able to make a refresh token. You can also verify if the Hydra client created successfully by running the following commands by sending request to the Hydra admin endpoint. And then you will get the list of clients available. In my case, I have a single client. And then also I can try to perform a client credential program to get create a token and get this token back by providing to the Hydra token client the command, some kind of client ID and secret. If you pass this command and run, you will get the token. You can keep this token for the future. We're going to use also this integration of Apache APISIX. Next, also you can test it out how token introspection works by providing this token to get the client information. You can just install the token previously created, and then also get this command to test it. We can able to collect the client information provided by token. So I will just make this command, and then I can see that with access token I can get some of the information for the given client. Afterward, we can use another command to redirect URI for our existing OS to client with Hydra, because in Hydra there is no kind of special command to create add this redirect URI. I can just request directly the admin endpoint to update the redirect URI list. In our case, it's just any redirect URI. It works after successful authentication. I'm putting just the URI of APISIX OpenID Connect plugin just to this page on APISIX. So if I press this code, we will get another response with the full client information, and then you can see that the redirect URI is actually updated. Next changes we need to apply for the Apache APISIX. The first step is we need to create a new upstream for our given product API as our backend, and we'll have a single node with this API as a backend service. So I can run this command against Apache APISIX admin API, because Apache APISIX provides admin API that we can configure like upstreams, roles, and services together. So I can just pass this command and run, and now I have a new upstream created. Upstream access a set of backend services. In our case, we have single product API, so we'll get successful response once Apache APISIX creates this upstream and maps all to the product API. Once we have upstream created, we can create a new route with admin endpoint call once again. We can just provide a route name, and we need to provide also for which HTTP method we are enabling this routing mechanism, and for the given URI. And also you can provide in the plugins list which plugins you would like to use or enable for this URL. In our case, we are testing various OpenID Connect plugin for the Apache APISIX to work with Hydra. So as you can see, I have providing the client ID and secret, and I'm giving also discovery endpoint of only Hydra server provider. And as a scope, of course, I'm going to use OpenID. In this case, we are just using of builder only. The property, it means we are testing authorization code flow using only Hydra. It simply routes a request to the login page, and that provided already Hydra in the 5 minutes tutorial to redirect to this login page UI that we're going to see. Now we can just copy this command and pass it into the terminal. And if I run, it will create a new route for the given upstream. As you can see, we are mapping this upstream. It means each request to this API / products endpoint will be authorized with the help of OpenID Connect, and our authorization server going to be Ory Hydra. So if I run this command, I got a successful response from Apache APISIX server. Once we enabled our route, you can open the browser and navigate to the API production test, and then it will redirect us to a login page provided by Ory Network. So we have just we have default credentials, as you can see, just for the login. You can provide login and password, and please remember me. You can just open this option as well. It will then in the next step it will ask to provide some consents to use OpenID. And I can say, okay, for my client, I want to access resources as a behalf of OpenID, and then I will click the allow access. As you can see, after I enable this allow access option, it will redirect to this OpenID Connect page on Apache APISIX website. It means our endpoint fully now kind of secured, and only after authentication process, the client can access this endpoint. I mean, of course, if you have reliability rates, it's different, but you can also provide this redirection to this API product endpoint. Next, we can try to test the authentication between services when machine-to-machine communication enabled. We are using, let's say, a client credential grant flow using Ory Network. But in the previous step, you may know, if not done it already, like we did authentication between browser and identity provider as Ory Network. That's why we set also when you create a route, we set also bearer only to false. It means after successful authentication, the OIDC plugin can obtain and manage the token in the cookie, and all the subsequent requests will gonna use this token. Sometimes you might struggle to figure out which grant type to use, and probably this diagram can be very useful for this scenario to quickly check what kind of credentials you need. For example, if the access token owner is machine, you can have a user client credential grant for this Ory Network, or if it is a user, you can just double check if it's a browser type app or server app. If server app, of course, you can give it to the authorization code grant. Otherwise, the grant is PKCE as for the native application, let's say. Similarly, again, update my plugins, OpenID Connect configuration. And each plugin, usually in Apache APISIX, has a set of attributes. You can check it out on our official website, what kind of other properties we have for the OpenID Connect plugin. And now, if it is like client to service communication, that's why we are enabling bearer only true. And other configuration pretty much the same, only we are adding also an introspection. In addition to the introspection point, we are also providing authentication method for introspection endpoint. So I can just run the next curl command to enable client credential grant for this our API. So if I run this command, I will get a successful response from Apache APISIX. Now the plugin is updated. Next and final step, we can check API endpoint can be only accessed with the authorization header token in place in the request after we enable this the client credentials. And every request we do against /API/produce should check the authorization bearer token in the header. So now we can make a native test. If I try to access /API produce endpoint, I should get this unauthorized error as we expected, because we didn't provide the token, and there is no kind of verification process between Apache APISIX API Gateway and identity provider Ory Network. So we need to send also tech token, the valid token. Of course, the valid token also going to be rejected directly from Apache APISIX. In the token area, we can use the token we created in the second command line. And then try to accept this endpoint with our sample client token that we created also before the step. So I can just copy this token and bring it here and try to now run this curl command to hit this endpoint with a valid token. So if I do that, I should get the successful response. Here we go. Now we enabled the authentication for this backend endpoint by using Apache APISIX OIDC plugin. With that, we are close to end.
So this is actually the demo I prepared also some time ago. It's very quite good. I'm also working with other integration, more advanced integration samples. But I think now maybe I can come back to my back slide because we are running out of time. That was everything what I want to show in terms of demo. But of course, as I say, I think you can find all these code examples on my report.
So all theoretical knowledge in mind.
Let's go this plugin. Let me switch to, now we can jump into maybe a Q&A session. If you have any questions regarding most of maybe APISIX or the Ory hardware or integration, feel free to ask.